Howdy folks, hope you're all having a good one, and welcome to another episode of Mingles with Jingles. This week's episode is once again sponsored by NordPass. I'm going to try to keep it brief this week, I'm sure you all know the deal by now. A 2-year NordPass premium plan, but this time with an extra 4 months for free, all covered by NordPass's 30-day money-back guarantee. If you don't believe you're getting value for money, just head over to nordpass.com/jingles and use code JINGLES to keep those passwords safe and organised. I've been using NordPass for the best part of 2 years now, mostly because I'm stupid and lazy, which I'm sure will come as a shock to exactly nobody, because for years I was using the same 2 passwords on every website where I had an online presence. And they were good passwords, they would have been very difficult to guess. But just having a good password isn't enough, you need multiple different passwords for everywhere where you have an online presence, because if just one of those websites gets hacked and your details get breached, then the breacher just goes on a fishing expedition with the email address and password from the one site that got breached and sees how many other sites it unlocks for them. So I was stupid enough to use the same 2 passwords across every website where I had a login for many, many years. And let's be honest here, because like most of us, I am far too lazy to go to the trouble of remembering unique, different passwords for every website where I have a login, I let NordPass take care of it all for me. NordPass generates all my passwords, NordPass saves all of my passwords, and if one of the sites where those passwords are used gets breached, it's only useful on that website, and NordPass tells me it's been breached and gives me the option of changing it there and then. So, a 2-year premium NordPass plan plus 4 months for free, all covered by NordPass's 30-day money-back guarantee. Just go to nordpass.com/jingles and use code JINGLES. Anyway, I was checking out what was new in the world of PC gaming this week, and it turns out that the Immortal Empires patch, or at least a beta version of it, has dropped for Total War Warhammer 3. So, if you don't know what that is, this is the Warhammer 3 version of what they did a couple of months after they released Total War Warhammer 2, where they gave people a chance to play through the campaign and so on, and then they dropped this massive patch that basically incorporated the world map from Warhammer 1 with the world map and the new game mechanics from Warhammer 2, and combined all of the factions from both of the games into one massive mega campaign. And this is now the same thing for Warhammer 3, except it's got all the Warhammer 3 content in there as well. What that means is that, I can't believe this is real, there are now 278 playable factions and 86 playable legendary lords. Unsurprisingly, they reckon that when Warhammer 3 was released, it saw, in the first couple of weeks after release, more than 100,000 concurrent players on it at the same time. That dropped down to, last month, something like 10,000. But the second this Immortal Empires patch dropped, and remember, it's just a beta version for Total War Warhammer 3, they're right back up to more than 100,000 people playing at the same time again. The problem, the downside, is that you do have to have all 3 of the games. You have to have Total War Warhammer 1, 2 and 3 installed in order to take advantage of this Immortal Empires patch. But
grab it while it's free.
Right now on Steam, Warhammer 3 is 10% off. It's still an expensive game,
paying for it,
but Warhammer 2 is 66% off and Warhammer 1 is 75% off. It's almost as if Creative Assembly saw the opportunity to make a fast buck by discounting the first 2 games in the series so people could play the Immortal Empires campaign on the cheap. I may have to reinstall them, although I'm not sure I've got enough disk space available. I think I've only got 600 gigabytes free on my solid state drive. And you do need a powerful machine. And I'm not talking about a powerful GPU here. It helps, but graphically, they are pretty games, but you don't need to turn all the graphical bells and whistles on to enjoy it. It still looks good without. Now, I'm talking about your processor and your RAM, because 278 different factions, right, and you play one of them. So you have your turn, and then the computer has to calculate what the other 277 factions are going to do at the end of every turn. And that takes a while. Speaking of stuff that's suddenly become available on the cheap, I don't know if you'd heard, but Square Enix are in the process of, in fact I think they have just finished getting rid of all of their Western development studios. So companies like Crystal Dynamics and the artists formerly known as Eidos Interactive have all been sold off. But that's not all they're doing. To mark the occasion, they're doing a 90% off sale on Steam on a whole bunch of selected titles from those studios. So not all of these are great games, but they're at least not bad, and they're 90% off. Well, okay, one of them is pretty bad, but if you're even morbidly curious about just how bad Marvel's Avengers was, you can find out, and it will only cost you $2. And there are some pretty good games on sale as well. You can get the Guardians of the Galaxy game, which apparently has had its most egregious bugs fixed, for only $6. The entire Tomb Raider series, which would have set you back $201, can now be yours for $20, or you can just buy the games individually if you want, all at 90% off. And the entire Deus Ex series can be yours for $3. Or the Thief series for $4.50. Also, if you're in the EU, I'm not entirely sure why there's a special deal in the EU and not in the USA, but if you are in the EU, you can get the modern Hitman games like Hitman 3 for €7. I mean, there are some very, very good games here, and even the ones that aren't very, very good and are merely not bad are an absolute bargain at this kind of price. And finally, and I realise this is probably going to be of limited interest to most of you, but if you're a former World of Warcraft player, you can get the latest expansion, Shadowlands, for free, right up until the release of the next expansion, Dragonflight, which is due out in a month or two. And it also comes with a level 50 character boost. Clearly they want people playing the game right up to the launch of the next expansion, so that hopefully people will stick around for the launch of the next expansion, but it's still a free game. Well, it's not 100% free, is it, because World of Warcraft is somehow still managing to exist on a subscription model instead of going free to play like almost every other MMO on the market. But I'm pretty sure that when you buy any of the expansions, you get 30 days free game time. So give it a shot. Grab it while it's free, play it while it's free. And if after playing it while it's free you decide that it's not for you and you don't want to have to start paying for it, then just cancel the cancel the subscription before you have to start paying for it. Easy. Anyway, moving on swiftly. Has anybody here actually upgraded, and I use the word upgraded in the broadest possible sense of the word, to Windows 11 from Windows 10? Because it's been available as a free download via Windows Update for quite a while now. See, I haven't. I have not installed Windows 11 because Windows 10 works just fine, thank you very much, and the new features in Windows 11 are not enough to convince me to upgrade. Because I got burned in the past by upgrading to new versions of Windows. In fact, I think I hung on to Windows XP for as long as I possibly could because it was great. And I think the last time I didn't regret updating to a new version of Windows was when I got Windows 95. And that was a very, very long time ago. The reason why I ask if anybody does have Windows 11 is that it turns out the latest security update for Windows 11 is locking people out of their PCs. I saw the warning on PC Gamer's website and I thought, what the hell? Oh no, wait, it's Windows 11. I'm fine. Because I don't beta test software for Microsoft for free. And I come to think of it, I did that quite a bit actually with various different versions of Windows. Because I held on to Windows 98 for as long as I possibly could and only upgraded to Windows XP when I no longer had a choice. But by the time I did that, all of the bugs had been worked out of Windows XP and it worked fine, and I really, really liked Windows XP. And it was the same deal when Windows Vista came out. I heard all the horror stories of people who were upgrading early. I was like, nope. Can I still use XP? Yes, then I will continue to use XP. And I only upgraded from that when I had no choice, and I couldn't continue to use Windows XP because Microsoft stopped supporting it, which meant that I actually skipped Windows Vista entirely. I never had it. I went straight from Windows XP. I might have even skipped Windows 7 as well. I can't honestly remember whether or not I had Windows 7 or Windows 8. Because normally, when you buy a new PC, it comes with whatever the latest version of Windows is, but that was never the case when Windows XP was still available, because even the retailers were offering you the choice of whatever the latest version of Windows was, whether that be Vista, 7 or 8, or would you just prefer a nice, simple, reliable, and cheap version of Windows XP installed instead. And I always went for Windows XP, because it wasn't broke, so why on earth would I want to fix it? This obviously stopped when Microsoft stopped officially supporting Windows XP, but that didn't happen until 2014, at which point that had been the preferred PC operating system of choice for 13 years. I can't remember exactly which version of Windows I was eventually forced to upgrade to from Windows XP. It was definitely either Windows 7 or Windows 8, because I know I skipped Windows Vista entirely, but it could be that I upgraded from XP to Windows 8, which meant I skipped 2 generations of Windows entirely because I was just so happy with Windows XP. And I'm pretty much doing the same thing now. I mean, there was no Windows 9. I only installed Windows 10 when I absolutely had to. And Microsoft are going to continue to support Windows 10 until 2025, apparently, which means that will be when I upgrade to Windows 11, once they finally, hopefully, finish working all of the bugs out. Well, anyway, moving on to something that isn't PC games related. I was watching a video on YouTube a couple of days ago about the... does anybody remember the fire that broke out in 2020 on the US Navy amphibious assault ship, the USS Bonhomme Richard, or Richard, however you pronounce it? The fire that burned for 5 days while the ship was in the naval base in San Diego. I was actually kind of surprised that a video on this subject made it into my YouTube recommendations feed, because it normally consists of nothing but Minecraft videos, football videos, boxing videos, and Korean pop videos. But a video on a subject that I might actually be interested in did make it through into my feed. And, I mean, you kind of have to be careful when you're watching documentaries on YouTube, because there's no way of guaranteeing that the person that did the video checked their facts. And even with the best intentions in the world, even if the person that did make the video thought they checked their facts, they can still get stuff wrong. I mean, I've been a victim of this myself. Does anybody remember when I was talking about the Belton Cooper book, Death Traps? Belton Cooper was an ordnance officer with the US Army in World War II, and he was responsible for the recovery of knocked out tanks. And he wrote a book called Death Traps, which was very influential. The problem with the book was that it was told from the perspective of somebody who usually only ever saw a Sherman tank when it had been knocked out and burst into flames. So he naturally formed a very, very poor opinion of the survivability of the Sherman tank in World War II, because that was his experience. But the thing is, he had a very narrow perspective, because you have to take other things into consideration, such as the fact that Germany was on the defensive and retreating, and didn't have the luxury of being able to recover their own tanks most of the time when they were knocked out, because they were falling back and the tanks were left on the Allied side of the front line, so the Germans couldn't recover them. But they were fully aware that any tanks that they knocked out could be recovered. So the Germans would keep shooting a tank after it had been knocked out until it burst into flames, so that it could not be recovered. And this was the general state that Belton Cooper saw most knocked out tanks in. So he naturally just assumed that Shermans in particular had an alarming propensity to just burst into flames when they were hit. But that was not the case. It wasn't his fault, he wasn't lying, he wasn't making this up, but he had a very narrow perspective in forming his experience. And unfortunately, his book was very, very popular and painted a unjustly negative perception of the Sherman tank for decades afterwards. So even if you've done your research, even if you're not making stuff up, you can still get it very, very wrong, which is why I'm usually a bit suspicious of so-called documentaries that you see on YouTube. Although, You know, I mean, most modern mainstream news media these days don't really bother to check their facts anyway, or deliberately lie and distort the facts in order to suit their political agenda. So, you know, whatever. I'm just saying go into these things with your eyes open. However, regarding the USS Bonhomme Richard, or Richard, or however it's pronounced, honestly, I don't know. Certain facts are not in dispute. The ship was alongside in San Diego, one of the US Navy's biggest naval bases. It burst into flames in 2020, and it burned for 5 days. Now, if a warship catches fire, and it's not as a direct result of somebody shooting at it, that means that somebody on board fucked up. It turns out that it was apparently deliberate arson, and somebody has been charged with that. So, okay, maybe somebody on board didn't fuck up. But the ship burned for 5 days in one of, if not the biggest naval bases in the US Navy. For that to happen, it's not a simple case of somebody fucked up. For that to happen, pretty much everybody involved fucked up. How can you say that, Jingles? Well, I do actually have some experience of this sort of thing. And it was a long time ago. But let me tell you my experience of firefighting on board warships in the Royal Navy. And bear in mind that I retired from the Royal Navy in 2011. And the last actual seagoing job that I had in the Royal Navy was on board HMS Manchester, a Type 42 destroyer, and that was as long ago as 2009. So we're talking 13 years since I was last required to know how to do any of this. And I'm not just talking about what my job would have been in a fire on board a ship. I would have been the duty first aider. I'm talking about everybody's jobs. How do I know what everybody's jobs were? Because even though my job would have been duty first aider, I was still trained to do everybody else's jobs, because you never know when you may be required to do it. If you have a fire on a warship, there's a reasonable chance it's going to be because you're getting shot at. And if you're getting shot at on board a warship, there's a decent chance that certain members of the crew are going to be killed. So the people who are supposed to do certain jobs might not be able to do them on account of being dead. And so everybody has to be trained to do every job, because you might have to do every job, not just the one that you are specifically trained for. So I'm going to take you through what happens on board a Royal Navy warship if a fire is discovered. And remember, I haven't done this in 13 years. And I'm not just going to take you through what I would do, I'm going to take you through what everybody would do. And I can remember it because it was so extensively trained and drilled into me. You ready? Here we go. So, we start with the person who discovers the fire. Let's say a fire breaks out in the wardroom galley, and you find the fire. The first thing you do is you start yelling at the top of your voice, "Fire, fire, fire. Fire in the wardroom galley." And you keep yelling, "Fire, fire, fire. Fire in this case, the wardroom galley," until something happens. And what is going to happen is other people will hear you yelling, and they will start yelling, and within seconds, that will reach HQ1, which is right next to the machinery control room, and is the ship's damage control nerve center. And the HQ1 watchkeeper will then trigger the main broadcast alarm and shout into the ship's main broadcast, "Fire, fire, fire. Fire in the wardroom galley." At that point, you know that the ship's damage control and firefighting organisation is swinging into action. And only at that point do you stop shouting, "Fire, fire, fire." In the meantime, you have also grabbed the nearest first aid firefighting appliance, which is usually going to be one of those pressurised red canisters full of AFFF, or aqueous film foaming fluid. One of those gives you about 60 seconds worth of firefighting. Doesn't seem like a long time, isn't, but I guarantee you, within those 60 seconds, somebody will be there to back you up. These will be the two members of the attack party. They hear the main broadcast alarm, they grab 2 firefighting appliances, and they run to take over from you. And while they're doing that, another 2 members of the attack party, known as the attack BA, or attack breathing apparatus, will first be getting into breathing apparatus and then grabbing another 2 portable fire extinguishers and rushing to relieve the 2 guys who do not have breathing apparatus. You and the 2 members of the attack party who do not have breathing apparatus will then fall back and start setting up a smoke boundary, because smoke kills more people than fire does. The ship's ventilation will already have been crash stopped. You'll be dropping smoke curtains and dropping hatches and sealing doors to ensure that the smoke stays inside the location where the fire is. You will then start setting up hoses. Setting those hoses up and connecting them to fixed firefighting appliances, big 3-inch hoses, and connecting them to the ship's fire main. And they're doing this because within 4 minutes of that alarm going off, the support party is going to turn up. Because as soon as that main broadcast alarm went off, the support party nominated from that day's duty watch have ran straight to either the forward or aft damage control and firefighting station, and they've been getting into those big compressed wool Fear Naught firefighting suits with breathing apparatus, helmets, big thick boots, thermal imaging cameras. These are the guys who, if the fire is still not under control, the attack party at the scene of the fire are going to get beaten back. They will shut the doors on the compartment to keep the fire in there, and the support party are the ones that are going to make a full re-entry with full fixed firefighting gear. Also, while all of that is going on, the containment party are swinging into action, because a fire needs 3 things in order to burn, and if you take any one of those 3 things away, the fire will go out. Although it can reignite if one of those 3 things is reintroduced. Fires need fuel, they need oxygen, and they need heat. Remove any one of those 3 things from the equation, the fire will go out. And a fire on one side of a bulkhead, in this case for example in the wardroom galley, can ignite a fire in the wardroom through conducted heat through the bulkhead. So if you take that heat away by running a hose over the bulkheads on all 6 sides of that compartment, the fire cannot spread. And that's what the containment party does. Meanwhile, on the gangway, the quartermaster has taken a muster of everybody who's still on board the ship, because he controls access to and from the gangway, so the quartermaster knows exactly which members of the ship's company are on board. The ship's company have been mustered at an emergency station where 2nd and 3rd support parties have been nominated. Other people are being sent to gather breathing apparatus to resupply the support party when they go in. There's a whole organisation that happens the second one person, and it could be you, starts shouting fire, fire, fire. Now 95% of the time, the person who finds the fire is the one who puts it out. But even if the person who finds the fire does kill that fire in the first 30 seconds, everybody involved in this procedure keeps going until they hear one thing, and that will be the damage control officer on the ship's main broadcast from HQ1 saying, "Do you hear there? This is the DCO. The fire is out. A sentry has been posted. Return and stow all gear." Until you hear that, you assume the fire is still burning, and you keep going until you hear that. And we'd have a major fire exercise like that, right up to and including the support party doing a full re-entry with hoses through the shut bulkhead door into the burning compartment. We'd have a full fire exercise detailing everything that I've just described at least once a week. Well, usually just once a week, usually not more than once a week, depending on where you were or what you were doing. But we'd have a minor fire exercise every day. And the minor fire exercise might only go up to the point where the attack BA or the attack breathing apparatus team turn up and start fighting the fire. But, the support party would still be getting dressed, because they have to practice getting dressed, because they have to be able to do it in 4 minutes. And then at that point it would say, okay, end of exercise, return and stow all gear. That would be a minor fire exercise, but sometimes we just have a briefing. And the briefings were important because, well, unless you were a marine engineer, part of the ME department, you never went inside the machinery spaces. The forward and aft auxiliary machine rooms, the forward and aft engine rooms. So, as part of that day's fire exercise, you'd get taken around the forward engine room, for example, and you'd be shown, okay, this is the exit. These are the emergency exits. There's fixed firefighting gear here. There's AFFF canisters here. There's breathing apparatus there. The Halon drench system operates here, here, and here, because you might one day have to fight a fire in a compartment that you would otherwise never have seen the inside of. And so that was all part of your firefighting training. And this happened every day. And these were just the jobs that anybody could be called upon to do. There were specialist jobs as well. The duty marine engineering senior rate, as well as being responsible for crash stopping the ship's ventilation to stop feeding fresh air to the fire, would also be isolating any electrical circuits that fed into the compartment that was on fire, because it could be an electrical fire. Then you've got the GWE senior rate, who would be advising the command on any potential hazards, not just in the burning compartment, but in the adjacent compartments as well. And every compartment on board, on the door or hatch that leads into that compartment, would have a list of all the hazards included in that compartment, as well as a plan showing you all 6 compartments adjacent to that compartment and what was hazardous inside those as well. Because a fire in the wardroom galley is, okay, it's bad, all fires are bad, but it's not that bad, it could be a lot worse. A fire in, for example, the main communications office doesn't sound bad, but there are things inside the high-power radio sets that generate extremely toxic smoke if they start burning. And if there's a fire in there, and it gets to the radio sets, nobody can go into that compartment without breathing apparatus. It's the same thing in the air weapon stores. There's thallium inside Stingray torpedoes. If that stuff starts burning, 1 part in a million will kill you. So you need to know about these things. And then once the fire is out, you have to come up with a plan for venting all of that smoke from inside the ship safely outside the ship without killing anybody in the process. So there's all kinds of specialist knowledge that's required as well. But it's all part of an organisation that practices every day, so everybody knows what to do. Meanwhile, apparently, on board the USS Bonhomme Richard, fire exercises went like this, when they even bothered to have a fire exercise, which wasn't very often, and certainly wasn't every day. Somebody would raise a red flag and say, "I am a fire," and then somebody else would say, "I am fighting the fire," and then the guy with the red flag would say, "The fire is out." Yes, really. When the San Diego Fire Department turned up, and this is a thing in Royal Navy warships as well when they're in naval bases, because, let's face it, actual firefighters have vastly more experience of fighting actual fires than we do. The only thing we had more experience of was being and living on board a ship, and so they would come to the ships and be given guided tour of the engine spaces. Because, let's face it, if the fire was still burning by the time the fire brigade turned up, it's probably because it was in an engine space. In most other cases, we'd have put the fire out ourselves. They'd still turn up, just in case. But they needed to know where they might be having to fight a fire, and so they would be given tours of the most likely places they would have to turn up and respond to. Meanwhile, in San Diego, on board the USS Bonhomme Richard, when the San Diego Fire Department turned up, there wasn't even anybody on board who could show them a map of the compartments where the fires were burning. Nobody knew how to use the firefighting equipment. The automatic firefighting equipment didn't work, which is probably good, because if it had triggered automatically, it would have probably killed everybody in the compartment, because automatic firefighting systems tend to operate by removing the oxygen, by flooding the compartment with an inert gas, like halon, for example. So that ship burned for 5 days and eventually had to be scrapped, because of an institutional failure to take firefighting seriously at all levels, from the most junior seaman on board all the way up to the captain of the ship. And what surprises me most about this is the US Navy we're talking about. This is the same Navy that during the Battle of the Coral Sea in World War II, when the aircraft carrier Lexington suffered so much damage that the Japanese were sure they'd sunk her. But thanks to the superhuman efforts in damage control and firefighting of the crew, were not only able to save the ship, but also get her back to Pearl Harbor, get repairs that should have taken 3 weeks done in 3 days, and have the ship combat ready and able to take part in the Battle of Midway just a week later. Now, thankfully, I don't think anybody died on the fire on board the USS Bonhomme Richard. But hopefully the loss of a multi-billion-dollar amphibious assault ship because nobody on board knew how to use the firefighting equipment has served as a bit of a wake-up call to the upper echelons of the US Navy. And it's a shame it had to cost them a multi-billion-dollar amphibious assault ship, but at least it didn't cost any lives, and it sounds like the wake-up call was very, very badly needed. I mean, this is the US Navy. They're supposed to be better than this. Anyway, on that bombshell, that is it for this week's episode of Mingles with Jingles. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've all had a great weekend, although you can forget it because now it's Monday. And as always, take care, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.